I think one of the hardest things for me about being in an emotionally abusive relationship was not having any concrete evidence to point to that I was being abused. Things were awful. I felt like I was in hell, but I didn't have anything I could like show for it, if that makes any sense. After years and years of like coercive control, which essentially is just forcing you to do things against your will, whether that's by manipulation or like veiled threats, my will was didn't matter. Like it didn't exist essentially after years of that. And I just desperately was so like searching for something to point to, but there wasn't anything. Like I even remember my mom was telling me recently that when she would come to visit, she would be so confused because my ex would be so kind to her. He would like bend over backwards and be so polite with her. And so she would just like have this cognitive dissonance of like, well, my daughter seems really unhappy and isn't doing well, but then her husband seems perfectly wonderful. And so even for my family, it was like not the math wasn't mathing. And so, I remember having this conversation with a friend who had experienced both physical and emotional abuse. And I was really surprised to hear her say that the physical abuse, there was a beginning and an end, and also, she could point to the bruises, and it gave her some validity that like she knew she was in an abusive relationship. But with an emotionally abusive relationship, she was saying, she's like, there's no beginning, there's no end, it's constant, and you also don't know that you're being abused. And I think that's what like was so hard. For me, I wasn't able to leave my relationship until my ex did do something. So I'm not gonna go into details, but like was so it was on a public stage, essentially. Like the public knew about it, and it was so concrete that like as soon as that happened, I was out. And I think it's because I just needed something, because years and years of having my will and my opinions mean nothing. Finally, when I had something outside of me I could point to, I was like, okay, cool, I now have proof, I can get out. But you don't need that. You don't need the proof, but it's hard to tell somebody that who's been coercively controlled for years on end.